right, session of the day. Give you time finding your seats. This will be Emerge from the Mail Merge, presented by Andrew Fuerste-Henry and Sarah Cornell. Hello.
I'm Andrew Fuerste-Henry. I'm the Assistant Director at the Dubuque County Library District in Asbury, Iowa. I really should say Dubuque County, Iowa. We're in 5 different cities, whatever.
I'm Sarah Cornell, who just turned on the microphone. This really bodes well. I'm from the Portsmouth Public Library in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
We're going to talk to you today about notices and how you can print notices in a nice format easily. This is going to be not dissimilar in end product from what Jason talked about, but following kind of a different path, and we'll get into that as we go along. Okay, so notices are complicated. We have here what you might recognize as the overdue notice and status, status triggers page of Koha. Some years ago, I was training libraries on Koha for Bywater, and this, specifically the third overdue notice trigger, was one of those weird little swamps that I was never excited to get to in training, because it was where I had to explain to libraries, okay, this is what we usually do. You want to send something to people who have lost a book. You know, a book gets so overdue, they get charged for it. You want to send them a letter that says, you now owe me $30 for that book. Well, you can't. You instead have to send them an email the day before that says, tomorrow, you're gonna get billed for a book. And like, that's fine. A lot of libraries were fine with that. Some were less fine. And then I trained in this library. It was the Dubuque County Library District. And they were like kind of difficult about this. They really dug in their heels and insisted that it needed to work differently. They needed to mail something to their patrons after the book was already lost. And that brought us entirely out of the overdue notices. They just don't work that way. They really only work on stuff that is not yet lost. And we went all around, and eventually I wrote them a report that they could download and take into Word and do a mail merge. And that was good enough. It got them off my back. It wasn't my problem anymore. And then I went to work for them. And it became somewhat more personally important. I still don't print these myself, but like I had to look Julie in the eyes and say, you can do a mail merge. It's not that hard. And it's not that hard, but it is that annoying. Last year in Portsmouth, I showed you this same page as I was talking about easy ways to use jQuery to just like stick some text into a page for yourself or for your staff. And at that time, this page had a little note that said, bills for long overdue notices are sent via US mail via a mail merge. And go here and download this thing. But now it says, you can just click on the thing and print them. Because we figured out a cool new way to do that. And actually, I came up with the idea last year while I was in Portsmouth. We were looking at pages, and I was thinking, what kind of data do I want to put on a page? Maybe I could generate a page of long overdue notices. And somebody did tell me at that point, hey, there's this new feature coming in Koha where you're going to be able to just print a report in your format based on a template. And I said, yeah, but that's like a year away. I want to do this now. And so we made a thing. So we can make our long overdue notices a little easier. I did this with a page. You can see we've got a long overdue page. And on that page, you see our long overdue notices with some patron information scribbled out. And when you Control P on that page, they print nice. They're one on a page and they look like a thing you can fold and put in a letter. Ooh, put in an envelope? Yes. Okay, this works with a page that displays the contents of a report brought into the page via some jQuery and then format it into a mailable thing with some CSS. Just got really loud for a second. Okay, so let's talk about this report a little bit. The report I'm using for these overdue notices really evolved off of the report I wrote way back in the day for a mail merge. That explains a little bit of it. And here's a pretty simplified version. I'm grabbing some title information for things that got lost and a little bit of borrower information so that I can format that elsewhere. This is where we run pretty immediately into the ways in which this is not going to be directly translatable to any other library, which is part of what Sarah's going to talk about, because she took this and translated it to her library. My first step here was really figuring out which lost items I wanted to send people a letter about. And so my where statement ended up being really pretty simple. I'm writing this for any debit type code that is lost. So anything where they owe us money because an item got lost and they owe us more than $0. And that fine was created, or the fee was created in the previous calendar month. This big goofy date thing is one of my favorite SQLisms, and it's a very long way to say, find me the first day of the previous month and the last day of the previous month. It makes me happy because it's so many parentheses. I can pretty well guarantee that this would be insufficiently specific for most other libraries. Like, I'm not doing anything in here to make sure that this is specifically a long overdue. It works for us because we just don't mark things lost much. We don't have a lot of bills. Someday this is going to send a letter to someone who had a regular lost thing that they already know about because they told us they threw the book in the river, and that will be fine. I don't want to make it sound like people throw books in the river a lot. It's a big river. It's right there. It's going to happen someday. This is more what my actual report looks like. And you can see it's getting a little more complicated. The big trick here was that we want we're taking these account lines, right, that are one line for every patron and lost item, and we're trying to group them at the patron level so we can tell the patron about all of their lost items, but also get some item-specific information. So I did some goofy stuff in here in the item list column to basically build a little CSV table in every field. So if you look at that second row, that person's got 3 books they lost. Cool Friends, Escape from the Isle of the Lost, and Rise of the Isle of the Lost. And those are each in their own line with types between each of the different data fields. And that's title, subtitle, barcode, kind of all the stuff I want to know in my notice pulled into this little sort of subtable, which is a whole bunch of concatenating things. I took all the stuff I wanted to know about each individual item and concatenated it into one string. This is all that item information. And then I group concatenated all of that for the patron. So each patron line contains that sub list of all the items. This is what that report looks like when I actually run it in Koha, and it gets super weird because in the actual report, we concatenated all those things together with the HTML table tags. So really, this is doing some ridiculous stuff because we've hidden HTML in the report data, and Koha only knows how to make that into HTML when it shows us this. It'd probably be some fancy way to make it not do that and make it just display that as plain text, but I don't really care. I don't ever really look at the report this way. Okay, but this makes my data, it exists, it is there, hooray. Oh, and one last view. Ultimately, our page is going to interact with this report via the JSON output. I don't know if any of you have spent much time looking at the JSON URL for each of your reports, but you've probably seen the link in the reports module. Maybe you hit it as soon as you got your Koha site set up and you've never thought about it again. But every report can be viewable in JSON. It's just a web page that gives you that report data with very, very minimal formatting. Like there are no column headings or anything. It's just each line of the report is within square brackets and then formatted out, sort of. I don't know, it's a JSON file. I don't know how to describe a JSON file. Okay, so our report exists and we want to get it into the page. We're going to do that with some jQuery. So this goes into the intranet user JS system preference. And it looks kind of complicated, but it's not doing a ton. It's finding the div called Long Overdues. That's what I'm going to put into my page to tell the page, this is where the Long Overdues go. It's hiding a bunch of stuff that we don't want to see on that page because Koha really wants like its little sidebars and things, and we don't want those on our printed notices. And then it's getting the JSON. And there's the JSON URL for my report. It gets that data, and then it does a for each loop. So this is a lot like what Jason was talking about yesterday in Template Toolkit. Was that yesterday or was that Tuesday? I don't know.
Last time.
Yeah, so it's very similar. For each of those lines, so each of those patrons, grab their data and make it into a thing. The thing isn't on this page because it was too long. Jason talked yesterday about in his template toolkit loop, he gave it a name that didn't mean anything. I'm forgetting what your name was. But this LO here similarly means nothing. I assume it stands for Long Overdue. Lucas and Bywater wrote this jQuery for me. I'm guessing at his intentions, but probably. Sarah and I both at one point or another in this process stared at that and thought, L-O, what do you mean? What's the secret code? And it's not important. Okay, so for each line of my JSON report, we're going to append some HTML to that Long Overdue div. So we're just sort of building a web page programmatically out of our reports data. And this is that web page. It's probably somewhat visible to you all, but basically it's a letter in HTML form. It's, there's a div in there for the patron address and a div in there for the actual text of the Long Overdue notice, and so on and so forth. And then you'll see a bunch of these little placeholders that are LO and then a number. Those are referring to the data back in my JSON. This is another point where it got confusing, because again, that JSON doesn't have data headers. So we can't, like Jason in his template toolkit got to do that in sort of plain English, put in a tag that says, find this column in my data and grab me that field. But we don't have headers, so instead we're referring to these all numerically. And they're zero indexed, I'm sorry. I don't know why computer people do this to us. Still, zero index means as you're counting your columns along the way to say, I want the fourth column, we all understand that the fourth column in any table is column number 3, because the first column is column number 0, because that's how numbers work, right? They start with 0 and they count up from there. Yeah, this is not the only place where Koha will make you stub your toe on that particular curve. What do we stub our toes on? I didn't prepare this. All right, so at that point, we've got a whole bunch of really unformatted text sitting on our web page, and then we need a lot of CSS to bash it into place. Again, like Jason talked about, we want to like scoot the address box in a little bit and space the address box in the meat of the notice, the text. so that it looks like a letter. So we can fold it and put it in our little envelope with its window on it.
Wow.
All right, so this is what my notice looks like on the page. Saw that before. This is how it prints without any CSS. Actually, yeah, that's it without the CSS too. And here it is trying to print without any of its CSS, and it's gross. It doesn't make us happy. It does not bring us joy. But we put the CSS in, and that takes away the dumb little bullets and moves everything around and puts in page breaks where we want page breaks. And it's very nice. We like it. And I ran out of slides. I thought I had another thing. Okay, so that's the general idea. I did want to give my obligatory bug shout outs. There are a couple of things that can make this a little easier to do. Bug 36152 would allow us to put jQuery right in a page. So right now, all that CSS you saw, I've got actually directly in the Long Overdue page, which I like because it's in the place where it needs to go. It's not in one of those giant CSS system preferences with everything else. They just won't let you do that with jQuery, I guess for like security reasons. Devs always like to say, like, if you let you do jQuery here, you might blow the building up. Okay, but it would be nice if it could be a little more contained there, because as is, that long string of jQuery is all in my intranet user JS system preferences, which is already long enough. And I would also just love to be able to define custom URLs for pages. Right now, the URL of any page you make in Koha is a long string that ends in the page ID number. And it would be nice to just like make a slug URL if I could just make that / long overdues and get on with my life. Anyway, that is, yeah, Katrina gave me a thumbs up. Yes. Right, that is the quick and dirty how it came together. Quicker than I thought because I talked fast because I got nervous. But now we're going to have a transition. And we're going to talk about how Sarah took that and implemented it at Portsmouth, which took some doing because it was a little idiosyncratic and local.
Mostly because they forgot to send in a CSS. Okay, so a little bit of background. This is also pretty sure, well, close enough, the route that my dad took when he drove me to college. Just context. I didn't go to college in Asbury. But yeah, so this is like nostalgia for me, except if you had it on those triptychs, okay, shut up. Because that was a long time ago. So we do use the third tab. Like so many other people, so let me back up, because I think this is I'm gonna tell you a little bit about how my half is gonna work with Andrew's half. So I'm going to show you kind of why we needed to do it slightly differently, not that differently, why I accosted them as soon as they said the word mail merge and said, give me your code because I need to try this. But also I'm going to actually show some of the step-by-steps because part of this experience was, and part of the reason it was still a valid presentation after the whole new page thing, is that when somebody says, oh, you just put the jQuery in, I go, okay. So I'm going to show you what that means. And when they say create a page, there's like 6 more clicks.
Just do it.
Okay, so I'm going to do like a little bit more nuts and bolts. So that's cool. And I'm going to do pros and cons. Just for my brain, I'm sure you could also think of some pros and cons, and so can Andrew, comparing this method to the notice template method. Okay, now, so since we are normal people, we do use the third overdue notice. We call it print instead of email. because we too have to do that fancy dancing about like when is it billed, when is it mailed. We actually want the mail to go out before the bill hits the account, so we're opposite. So we actually want a print notice to appear in the patron's account, and then previously they had like a 7-day window, but because those two things don't use the calendar the same way, so there's always a little window, and that works for us. That's good because it means we have to take less money in. And we are also only taking in long lost bills. So less money we take in, the better. So we wanted to generate a print overdue notice, and we want to be able to see this in the patron account. As far as I can understand, you can, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if you want your frontline staff to be able to say, well, yes, we did send you a letter and this is what it said, we want this to be visible. The date might be a little bit off because we generate them once a week. So we don't do them monthly. That would be just a little bit too long of a difference. But once a week means, okay, this says you were billed for it, but there's no charge on the account. So we can see, oh yeah, we mailed you a bill. Oh wait, that was just generated yesterday. It's Tuesday. Yeah, of course you haven't gotten it yet. And this display is still in the notice. It just generally has the same words in it. So the first step, once you steal somebody's code, is you paste or you figure out your report. You probably, if you've been doing a mail merge, doing that suffering, you probably already have a report. So down here, and yeah, I am actually trying to impress you with just like, oh, this is all good. You don't have to read it now. What's important is down here is this is how we work. We look in the message queue for the letter code of the letter that was quote unquote sent within the last 7 days, make sure it's still checked out, and we make sure that it's actually, for some reason we were getting like bills that weren't quite matching up, so we had to put in another little fail safe that said it's 30 days overdue, just to make sure. So if you think those aren't our criteria, that shouldn't stop you. Okay, I'm sure you could still come up with stuff. What you'll also notice is that it's slightly longer because there's a little note in here that says the remaining fields won't be used in the page. So keeping in a little bit of legacy thought. So I was like, somebody might at some point want me to use that, or I might want that again. You know, maybe Monday I'll go home and go, you know what? I made it through a whole conversation and now I want to delete it. Okay, so this is what ours look like with our little orange clouds. It does look bonkers, but as you can see, it still does that, like throws in the titles underneath. We still use our old mail merge Excel file because that's in tabular form. And then on Wednesday nights, they can print it out or just run it and go to the shelves. So the CERC staff is using a mirror of this report that doesn't group by title. Yeah, that's another different way, but I can't imagine sending CERC staff out to the shelf with this. So all the data's in there, it's okay. I could probably make it a little easier for them to read if I remove those extra lines. But this is a lot of the reason a little bit of the gunk is still in there is that I do SQL, like A-OK, pretty confident in SQL. I don't write CSS. I read CSS. That's like how I speak Italian. And I can sort of comprehend a jQuery, okay? So a lot of the gunk that's in there would totally not pass any accessibility tests whatsoever. That is kind of something, just it's a cost that I'm willing to accept in the ability of just me as an individual being able to hack what I need. Okay, so you create the page. Yeah, dude, you just create the page. No, you click on new entry. You change the display location to staff interface. You have choose a library if you have to. Give it a title of Long Overdues, because then you'll never find it again. I don't think it'll even let you save it. Under view, you hover over view, click on source code. This is what you paste into your source code. And the fact that is, you just make a page, like that's so, my brain is already in a puddle on the floor. And then you hit save, which is the only thing we've done wrong here so far. And then you go back to this totally wacky page. Just like, can you tell I'd like this page to be different? So this table is actually like long over here. So you find the one that has the correct title, Long Overdues, which we obviously cut off, and you right-click or hover over or click on somehow and locate, yes, I'm trying to make this sound difficult, the URL, which as Andrew said, ends in page ID 49. So that's what you need, and that's what you're going to link to when you on Wednesday night, they run a report from a link, and then on Thursday morning, they use this link to print them out. And you upload your logo or letterhead, which I think you do differently, but also you didn't mention, right?
No, I didn't mention.
Yeah. So then you upload your logo or letterhead, or you send it to Bywater, because I think that also works, if they are your people. So you go to tools, upload. Luckily, the breadcrumbs are up there. In browse, you just browse for your thing like normal, minus PPL letterhead logo, call it a picture file, and allow public downloads. If you don't hit allow public downloads, you don't get a link. And then once you hit upload, you go back to this page and you use the search uploads by name or hash value and use some keyword that hopefully you put into your incredibly useful file name. And then you locate the image URL, which is similar to locating your page URL. Over there in public, you can right-click whatever. You locate and save somewhere else handy the image URL. And now you very bravely try to remember where to paste new jQuery in the intranet user JS syspref, which is terrifying because I never know where I'm like, did I miss the last curly bracket? Okay, so obviously I'm totally terrifying is that she's never going to answer my tickets. This is why you pay for a test server, but then you still have to put it on your live server. So okay, so but anything that you borrow from another Koha library will hopefully end with some notes, or start and end with some notes, and you'll know that starts with long overdue notices, ends with end long overdue notices, and you should be able to get it there. This is not interesting until I point out. So first orange box is report ID 1156. So you needed to make note of your report number, which I don't think is said out loud. So you need that report, which is also part of Andrew's. To add in your logo, you paste in the URL there. And then in all of the LO square bracket 1, 2, 3, 4, then you need to slowly count from 0 and locate your column. You may also, if you're using, like if you usually put different things in the title information area, you might have different headers. I'm only highlighting that because it's possible you might just maybe do it in a different order and end up with some funky columns until you fix it. Okay. Then you paste the CSS into the intranet CSS syspref, which now I know you put in the page.
Yeah, I moved it. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. This is similarly nerve-wracking because it's also pacing at the end of a sysgraph. Same caveats as above. And then you run it just to see if it works. So that's when I say run it, you open the page link. And it's not gonna look right on your browser. So what you're optimizing is not the browser, it's this envelope. So, and this is like one of the things that I was, bookmarking in my head after the last presentation was that, wait, what if somebody was using a screen reader and needed to proofread this on Thursday mornings? What if they had to do this and all of that extra gunk was in there or like the sizes of everything was totally hacked together. So this, yeah, it needs some cleanup, but it so works because it is literally a one-click situation for our Thursday morning staff who's spooky as Julia. Okay, so you'll see that it also doesn't have built-in page breaks. That's where the missing CSS came in handy. I was being so cool. I was like, oh, it's not working. It's totally me. And then there's this sweet little email that says, I think I forgot the CSS. And so the orange boxes here are the things that you're likely going to have to fiddle with. So, and part of the reason I'm pointing these out, I mean, this is two sections, obviously. Part of the reason I'm pointing these out is you probably don't need to rewrite the whole thing. Like you really do just need to pinpoint, okay, when I printed it out, oh, that's right, they like that in the middle. I'm gonna have to figure out how to center that. And then you go to W3C schools and, is that the right way? And you go like, oh, wait, that's why I center things, okay? Or you remind yourself how to do padding and you say, okay, well, I can basically smush this over until it works on Julia's computer. The other thing is, when I print something, it doesn't matter what it does on my computer. What you really need to be doing is the human with the browser from the desk and the printer. So you could get this up and running and then go actually work with the human who's going to do this. There's no such thing as perfect, especially since it also includes turning off printing headers and footers. And most staff, like they have better things to worry about than having that turned off, knowing how to turn that off and on. Okay, so pros and cons. This is a one-click situation. There's a link. It's not a button, but it could be a button. They say, it's Thursday at 8:30. I press this button. I press print. We're good to go. We spend 45 minutes folding, and then we're good to go. It doesn't require report permissions. And it groups titles under each patron, which is admittedly also, of course, a benefit of another method that actually has a lot more to do with the SQL than it does to do with the method. But I find that after all the conversation over the last couple of years about people who are just done doing mail merges, are just done, is being able to group titles under each patron is just, it saves so much time. We were literally cutting pages apart and taping. It's very professional. So the cons of this are the bravery of using CSS and JS syspreps. However, it's actually a fairly accessible way to get started with jQuery and CSS because you're actually engaging with it and you've looked at it for a while and you're like, wait, this actually works when I do this. It's the kind of thing you go home and you show your kids and you're like, oh my God, Mommy did that. It has 4 interlocking parts. So if something breaks or if you change a setting on one part of it and it makes the other part not work, or you have no idea why its font size never changes no matter what you do, I have no idea why the font size is always the same. If you have to save an archive for the staff, you have to print to PDF. And as Andrew said, the data is called by column number and not column name. When do we wrap up? I have a lot of time.
Yeah.
Okay. So the pros and cons of the notice/template method, as I'm going to call it, because of course I had a lot of time right before this conference while I was losing my mind. I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. You might have seen my post on the Bywater Partners Slack channel saying, okay, I'm doing it. Except I coded it in, so how does that work again? And so I actually created on my system an exact replica. Font size is still the same, don't know why. And it totally works. It totally works. But there are some very distinct political pros and cons. So you can keep an archive of downloaded HTML. Like if the people who have to print it also need to save it to your shared drive, which, I mean, we saved our, because there was so much work, we saved the Excel from all of our mail merges. Somebody else must do that as well. You only have to use CSS. You don't have to interact with jQuery at all. The columns are called by name. Very handy, easier to proofread for sure. You can easily preview the report in tabular form. So somewhere around click 2, 3, or 4, your staff could actually say, okay, does this look right? Maybe print it, maybe run to the shelves if there aren't too many, but it is previewable in tabular form. And the cons are a hole in 12, if you will. There was just something a little weird. I know there was a little bit of user error, but also if there's a little bit of user error, you might think that you have a perfectly fine report and that you have to say download it for it to work correctly, and it turns out you're using the wrong template. But I think there's a little bit more, there are more potholes for staff in the notice template method unless you use a URL that embeds the report number and the template number. Sound right? So if your goal is unmediated, independent staff, all they have to do is print and fold and getting out of their way, then one may work better than the other for you. For me, it's definitely the first word that I stole from Andrew a year ago. Oh my gosh.
I feel like I should back up and give more credit to Lucas. Like it's only fair. Really, I sat next to Lucas at Portsmouth last year and I described to him the thing I wanted and he wrote me some jQuery and CSS that really did the thing I wanted and then I fiddled with it a little bit. I also am very much at a point of like, I can take some existing jQuery and CSS and I can see what it's doing and I can edit it to do something a little bit different. But the like blank page of let's build a thing from scratch is kind of terrifying. I like that you mentioned doesn't require reports permissions as a pro of our method. There is certainly a point of view from which a user with bare minimum permissions can get a list of all the patrons who owe you money is maybe a con. Like that really depends on your library and how many staff you have and who gets to see what. Like in my library, all 14 of our employees can see patient records and it's fine, but your experience may differ. Does anybody have questions? I do want to reiterate, I feel a little bit at this point like the con of my method was that it's not as slick as the new report template thing. And the pro is it was available a year ago and it was super duper easy to translate it into the new format. I really took the HTML out of my jQuery, smashed it into a notice, put in like 2 lines of template toolkit. It's pretty easy. It even uses the same report.
So I seriously said to Andrew the other day, I said, should we just not? So that's why I tried to focus on the mechanical learning of it, where I think showing an entree into how to do this kind of thing will totally serve you another way. So I hope that.
I think if anything, your presentation has sold us more on the templates. I mean, but no, honestly, to see where you were a year ago and where we are coming up with what we will be able to do, I mean, that's a huge leap for us. So, I mean, it's fantastic that you guys figured out a way to do it, and anybody that wants to jump into it can certainly do that. But it makes me appreciate the lead that Koha is taking.
I've been trying to think of things you could do with our weird page template, and I haven't come up with anything yet.
Sarah, I loved your slides where you highlighted the boxes that my eyes needed to focus on. Like, that's super important with that many lines of code. It's hard to say, where do I go? What do I have to fix? So A+ for just really identifying from a beginner's standpoint, like, what am I looking at? Like, let's narrow it down to a couple of lines versus 56 lines that don't mean much other than these need to be here. So way to go. I appreciate that. And a shout out to everybody who's done presentations thus far. It's been amazingly beginner friendly as well as advanced, and we all can build on what Sarah and Andrew have done, what Jason has done. Like, it's been super awesome to see this progression.
There are a couple of online comments about how Andrew was great helping SFPL out as an educator. And Donna says that the transitional slide is the best transitional slide ever. I would say from my perspective, I like what we're going to be able to do with reports now in the templates, but I also appreciate this stuff because there's a lot of things in Koha that have changed and have gotten easier, but it's the hard stuff like this that I learned a lot of good stuff from. Like, one of the things that's being kicked around is this idea of changing when you delete an item, that item moves in deleted items, moves from table to table. And so there's this idea of, let's just create a new column in items that says this item is alive or it's dead, essentially. But having items and deleted items taught me a lot about how to write a better report when I have to get things out of both of those. So I appreciate that things are getting easier, but I also appreciate that things have been hard, and that makes it, you can learn a lot of stuff from working around the things that are hard.
Yeah, I do like this idea as a demonstration of building something that you want to see in a roundabout and kind of difficult fashion, simply because you have the tools to do so. I encourage you all to go forth and build a mess.
We've been super happy, like, oh, this is coming. We're so excited. The one thing that we did talk about with the upgrades is report URLs that you bookmarked are going to break. So just in that form, just something to note in your head.
Oh no.
Yeah.
The JSON ones, I think, are fine. But also, you mentioned you've been trying to come up with other ways to use this kind of thing on, like, the pages with reports that wouldn't be better with templates. Lucas and I figured out pretty early on, you can make data tables out of reports on the pages.
Yeah, and on the OPAC,
Oh,
because you can make your pages public facing.
yeah.
So actually, that would be a thing. If you wanted to make a cool infographic like Jason did, you could make a public facing infographic, sits in your OPAC, and if anyone wants to, can come along and see like how the library's been doing. That could be pretty cool.
I think one of the things I love about this community is you can see somebody doing something like that, and you might not want to do that, but you can go, I'll do this instead. And I have a couple of things that I learned from the terrific Every Other Thursday things. I wanted to have my staff notified whenever a hold was checked in by our smart bin from FE Tech, because we don't really have any way of telling. And so, I used some other alert that they had, I think related to calendars or something, and I refigured it and used JSON to have now a report on the front page that says, hey, this book has a hold, go look in the smart bin for it. And I can't even remember which parts I got from Andrew, which parts I got from the training, what I figured out, but it works now. I am gonna have to update the link in my jQuery for that, and then the other thing I found is like with this pages thing, we were starting to have to make staff run a different paging report every day because sometimes we want to pull for some libraries and not for others. And I used a page and I just made a link, a button for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then they click on Monday and it goes to that report link. And then it's already run it for them. And of course, I'm going to have to update those too, but it shouldn't be too hard once I have that thing. And the page is the only thing you can only do it for all the libraries or just one. And I would like it to be able so that my bookmobile people can also see that page and not have to just make a whole nother one for them. So I think there's a bug in for library groups for the HTML customizations, but I'm not sure there's one for the pages in there, unless anybody else knows. So I might have to file that one.
If we're ragging on pages, if anybody has an idea of how to make that pages page look less goofy, I'm open for it. I don't have an idea though. I just, like Sarah, I stare at it.
I think we need a page to review the pages. And then I realized that was just like that.
I just want to say that I learned some of the SQL that I put in my reports from Andrew, so I gotta give him shout outs for that. And this was great. And I do agree, seeing how to use the JSON calls in jQuery is really helpful. Because yeah, you can do it with the templates now, but I cut my teeth on that too. So
yeah, really the broad idea of if you can get data into a report, your other parts of Koha can see that report via JSON and use that data to do things on your page. Can do a lot. Like if there's ever a time you want Koha to look or behave a little differently based on, I don't know, what type of patron it is or something.
And if you want to get extra fancy, you can learn how to do that through API calls instead in your user.js, and it's faster and more efficient.
Yeah, honestly, if you're not at a tiny library in rural Iowa, look at the APIs faster and sooner. Because my system is nice and forgiving because it's small. To write weird reports and do goofy stuff, and it doesn't slow down too much.
Ta-da!